I am Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj. I work as an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science at Jesus and Mary College, University of Delhi. So friends, once again we are here to discuss the topic, the subject of web programming, and as we are doing in the past few lectures of this series, today also we are going to talk a little more about front-end web development. That is the web development which takes place for the client's end, where we are going to use various tools and techniques of HTML to design various attributes of a web page, like we have discussed about tables, we have discussed about frames, and in the last series we were discussing, in the last lecture of the series we were discussing about forms. So in this lecture we are going to continue with our discussion on forms, and we will also talk about cascading style sheets, because once your HTML, where your HTML ends, then your CSS style sheets begin, right. So the style sheets are going to add one more layer of interactivity. It is going to add one more layer of enrichment to the tags that we have so far used in HTML. So anyways, so first we will talk about the remaining attributes of the form tag that we were discussing in the last lecture. So as we had seen that in order to design forms in HTML, so forms can be designed for various purposes. You can have websites which are collecting users information, you can have feedback form, you can have registration forms, you can have online payment forms, you can have n number of various purposes for which forms are incorporated into website, and depending upon the purpose of the form we use different types of controls or different types of elements for the user to enter the data. Like we had discussed that there are some text input controls in which we can take different types of text input from the user, like we have a text box in which user can type one line of text. We have a password in which also user can type a text, but the text is going to be masked because it is a password kind of thing. Then we had discussed about if the user wants to add more than one line of text, then the user can use the text area control. Then if you want to allow the user only to choose from a specific number of choices which are given, then we use the checkbox control, right. So in this checkbox control the user can select multiple options out of the given options. For example, if you want to take the hobby of a user, so a user can have more than one hobby, so the user is allowed to check or to tick or as many boxes as the user likes. Then the next control is the radio box control, or sometimes it is known as radio button control. In this, generally the attribute is given, the property of the radio box button is that one out of the available choices will be selected. That is, user can only select one of the given. For example, gender. So the user can select either male, female or other, right. So only one of the available choices can be selected in the radio button. Then there are other types of controls also, like you have a select box control in which a drop down appears, right. Then you can have a file uploading control, you can have hidden controls, you can have buttons, and you can have submit and reset button. So each of these controls we will be discussing. So in radio button, you create the radio button using the input tag of the HTML, okay, but the type attribute is set to radio. So how we use it? We use it like input type is equal to radio. Of course, we know that all this is going to come under the form tag. So input type is equal to radio, and then you give it a suitable name. For example, in this case the radio button is being used for knowing the marital status of the user. So we are giving the name marital status, and we give a value to it. So the value is single, and you can, like in checkbox you give checked and for the default button. So here also we give checked and you write single. So now what is this? If you look here, you have made 3 radio buttons, and each of the radio buttons has the same name, okay, but the different value. Now why are we giving the same name? Because in any case the user will be allowed to select only one. Please note, if you will give different names to a radio button, say for example you give the name marital status 1, marital status 2, marital status 3, then your radio button will allow multiple selections, that is, it will act like a checkbox, right. So this is very important to note that all the radio buttons will have the same name, only then one out of the given radio buttons can be selected. And also this is important to note that the name attribute can be used to alter the behavior of a radio button and a checkbox. If you want a checkbox to act as a radio, then you give same names there, and if you want a radio to act as a checkbox, you give different names here. Likewise it works, right. So in this case you will give a name and a value. Again, the significance of the value attribute is the same, that is, when this radio button, particular radio button will be selected, whatever is given in the value attribute will be sent to the server, right. So the value attribute is the value which is going to be sent to the server, and the name attribute is used to identify the radio buttons uniquely, right. So we know that, and you can also give the size of the radio button. You can give the size of the radio button in pixels, whether you want a smaller radio button or you want a bigger radio button. Now the style attribute we will be talking when we talk about the style sheets, right. Then you can always give a title to the radio button. So as we had discussed earlier also, that whatever you will give in the title attribute, that will be displayed in the tooltips for the element. That is, when the user will hover the mouse over the radio button, then some information will be coming on it. Then we can also give, like we can give in the checkbox, here also we can give the tab index of the element like the radio button, which will tell the order, the tab order in the form, which will allow the user to press the tab key and navigate from element to element. So you can set it to positive integer, or you can set it to negative integer. So whatever your tab index is, that much your tab will move forward and backward. Then of course type of the element can be given, okay, and the value we have already discussed. Then the next element which is very important and very commonly used is the select element. The select element basically it shows a drop down list of options, okay. So it is also sometimes known as a drop down list or a drop down box, or it can be called as an option box. So here what we are saying, in this we are allowing the user to select one or more items from a list of predetermined choices. Like you must have very commonly seen that in case of country, the drop down shows. In case of state, there is a drop down which is showing, because you do not want the user to enter any value of the choice, but you want them to select out of a given range of values. So in this case, you can see here you have a sample select list here showing, right, and the attributes which you use are the name attribute, the ID attribute, the size attribute, and the multiple attribute. So the name attribute can be used, okay. So in this case the name is used for identifying it, okay. Then you can use the value attribute also, and you can use the selected attribute also, right. So in this case what happens, whatever you are giving in the value attribute, that is the value which will be going to the, in case of option, that is the value which is going to the server. And for a particular option, when you are giving a selected, you are saying selected, that option is going to come as selected by default from the user. And in this case the size attribute that we are giving in case of select element, that many number of options will be shown to the user. Generally by default one option is shown, the first option may be shown, but if you want more than one option to be shown to the user by default, then you can give size is equal to say 2 or 3, that many options will be given. Then some of the select boxes, they will allow multiple selections also, that is you can choose more than one option also. Then for that we use the multiple select option. So in this case, the select and the option, they run in in combination. So within the select you can give n number of option elements, and then you can close the select, right. So the automatically this will be shown, the select menu will be created and the drop down will be created and shown to the user. Then in most of the form or in all the forms we see buttons are there, right. So what is a button? Basically a button is also a type of control, it is also a type of input control, but when we click the button it will trigger some action method on the form tag. If you remember, we had discussed that the form tag has got two attributes, one is the action attribute, the other is the method attribute. So action attribute is what? Action attribute, if you remember, specified the URL where the data of the form is going to be processed, and the method attribute specified the way in which the data is going to be sent. So when you are looking at a submit button, so you have input type is equal to submit. So in that case, when the user is going to click on the submit button, the value or the data of the form, okay. So how does it go? It goes in name and value pair. So we have seen that for all controls we give a name and then the value is given by the user. So the name is equal to value pair for each element will be sent to the web server, right. So submit button basically it sends the data to the web server, right. Now in case of submit button we can have different attributes. First of course is input type is equal to, you will write submit, then you will give a name to the button, so you can give any name you like, then you give an ID to the button and you give a value. Now here it is important to note that whatever you will give in the value attribute of the submit button, that will become the caption of the button. Say for example in this particular button the caption is submit query. So you will write value is equal to submit query. Whatever you will give in the value attribute will become the caption of the button, okay. Then another type of button which can be used to reset the fields of the form to their initial value, okay, that is known as reset. So here again you will write in the input type only, input type is equal to reset, and you will give a name to this button, an ID to this button and the value to this button. Here also the rule remains the same, that the value attribute will be the default caption of your button, okay. So here you are writing value is equal to reset, so then your reset button is having the caption as reset. If you write value is equal to refresh, then the value then the caption of the button will become refresh button, okay. Then many a times we have certain input fields which are hidden, okay. Now the hidden means that the form, this particular control is not shown to the user, okay, it is not displayed on the web page, but it resides on the form. So it can be accessed by both client side as well as server side scripting, both can access this, but it is not shown to the user. The purpose could be varied purposes could be there. For example, if you want to keep a count of how many people visited the page, then also you can use it. Otherwise also for having certain information, extra information hidden in your form, we can use this. So these hidden controls can be used. So how do you put a hidden control? So you will again write input type is equal to hidden, and the rest of the things are the same as we are using for the other buttons, right. So it will be, now here this is not a button actually, it is a field, right, but it is a hidden field which is not shown on the page, which is not displayed on the page. Then we have been using labels with all the controls, like for example when you are putting a text box, so you are writing that please enter your name, or when you want an email you write email, like this, right. So for this we can also use a control called the label control or the label element in the form. Now label element basically it helps in aligning and displaying the text very in a very structured manner, in a proper manner on the web page. So there are two ways in which labels can be given to all our controls. Say for example, if you want the user to enter the email, so your label is email, so you can put both the caption as well as your input type tag, the input tag within the label. This is one way of doing it. Another way is that you only give the label for, so you write label for email, you write email and close the label, and then your input type is equal to text is going to follow. So you can use both these methods, both these commands to insert a label along with your form control. Label will only have the information, a prompt for the user to know what type of information is being asked to be filled in that particular type of control, whether it is name or it is email or it is password or whatever, right. So it's a way in through labels we make the form readable for the user. So either of the two can be used, and you can see for yourself what is the difference in the output when you use the the first format or when you use the second format. That can easily be seen, right. Now we know that a form has got several elements. So we know that there is text also, there is password also, and there are all n number of different types of controls, right. Now if you want to make the look of the form more aligned, you want to make the look of the form more neater, then there are different ways in which you can align the contents of the form so that they are shown in a proper manner, so that they are shown in a in proper alignment basically. So for this, the one of the very easy options and one of the very common options which users use is to use the table, right. So what we are doing, that we are putting all the elements within the table. So we will use the table tag, okay. You can use it with a border also, right, and within the table tag we can create different rows and columns to align the attributes or to align the controls of the form. So you can see here we are creating different rows, and in each row we are displaying the different columns. So the look of the form will appear somewhat like this, right. So you can control this appearance. If you do not want the borders to be there, then it looks further neater, and if you want, you can give a different background color to a table, like in this in the third table you can see a different color is shown. So that also makes it look very lively and interesting. So you can easily align the contents of a form using tables. Other than this also, there are ways and methods by which you can align, that we will discuss later when we are doing the style sheets. But at the juncture even tables are a very good option to align and to make the form look very neat and properly formatted. Then so far the attributes, that the controls that we are discussing, these are supported by the previous versions of HTML. But with HTML5 there are a few more controls that have been incorporated, that have been used, right. So HTML5 that way allows more controls to be there, and different types of input can be taken from the user. Like for example, you can if you want that the user has to enter the email address, right, and you want to make sure that the email is in the correct format. You must have yourself experienced many a times that when you put in the email and your format is not correct, automatically the form points out that your format of the email is not correct. So in order to prevent the user from making a mistake, you can use the right type of control, right. So in this case, the first control that we use is for entering the email. So you will write input type is equal to email, because you want the user to enter email type of data. Then you can give the other attributes like we have been giving for our other input control. So you can obviously you can give a name to the control, you can give the ID to it. Now see, ID and name both are used within the form to uniquely identify the element. Say for example, if you have two emails, right, you want the user to enter personal email also and work email also. So then it becomes very important to identify the email, and when you want to access the email, it's very important that you identify. So therefore name attribute should always be specified. ID may be, may not be specified, but it is always advisable that both name and ID attribute should be supplied. Then you can specify the size, okay. You can specify the maximum length using the max length. Then you can specify the value. So value attribute here will be the default value which we will see, which the user will see when the form loads. So if you are specifying something in the value attribute, that will appear written within the control, right. Then placeholder, that if no value is supplied by the user, then some value can be filled in, and you can also make this field as a required field, that is, the form cannot be submitted unless the user has put in some value into it. So you can make it sort of mandatory, right. So this control, the email control, is used for asking the user for his correct email ID in the proper format, right. Then we can also accept some information from the user in URL form, right. For example, if you want the user to enter the name of their website or the link of a particular document that they would like to share. So in that case, the control is not going to hold ordinary text, but it is actually holding a URL. So what will you give? You will give input type is equal to URL, because this particular text box is not going to hold ordinary text, but it's going to hold a link. So you will write input type is equal to URL, and the rest of the attributes are more or less the same that we have used for other attributes, like the name attribute, the ID attribute, the size attribute, the max length, value, placeholder, and the required attribute. So all other attributes are more or less the same, but here the input type will be only a URL. The user is expected to only supply a URL in this case. Then if you want the user to specify the telephone number, right. So in this case also the telephone number has to be specified in a particular format. So here the another control that you can specify is input type is equal to tel, TEL, that is, right. So in this case the input type is equal to tel will only allow user to fill in the telephone number in the right format. If the format is not correct, it is going to prompt to the user that kindly provide the telephone number in the correct format. Then you can have the name attribute, ID, size, max length, value, placeholder, and required, like all the other attributes that we have discussed, right. Then you can also have a search box within your form, like that is going to give the user a box and a search button, so that it can automatically, the user can search for something like a Google search from your form. So here the input type is equal to search, and when you use input type is equal to search, it will automatically insert a text box where the user can enter the search term, and it will also put a button besides it to be clicked when the user has entered the search term the user want to search, right. So here this particular attribute will be used for searching of the any term that the user wants. So this is like a mini Google search option which you are providing within your form. So here also the attributes, the other attributes are name, ID, size, max length, value, placeholder, and required, which are more or less the same that we have discussed for other attribute. Then if you want a data list to be specified. Now this is very interesting. This is somewhat similar to the select option that we had used, right. So if you want the user to specify or to select from a list of option, then you can either use select or you can also use the data list, right. So in data list, this is the format of the data list and how it appears. So you have to specify the ID for the data list, and then you can specify the different values for the data list. So whatever you are specifying in the option value is going to appear in your data list, and here you can, this is the value which is going to be copied or which is going to be sent to the server also. So how it is going to work? It is going to work with data list dot colors value is equal to red. So if the user chooses red, then that value will go to the server with the ID of colors, because that is the name of your data list that you have created, right. Then we can also specify the slider control. Slider control is generally used when you are taking users feedback, or when you are asking the user to mark something, to specify a range of options. So in this case you can choose a number between 1 and 100, and you allow the user to specify a lower end and a higher end. So lower side and a higher side. So in this case your input type will be a range. So you will write input type is equal to range. You will give a name to it, say my choice. You will give an ID to it, and you will give two ends, you will give low and high. So you can give any number also. You can give 1 to 5, or you can give 10 to 100. Any number can be given in it, but a slider control is going to appear for this. So friends, we will be talking about a few more controls which are unique and specific to HTML5, and they are very useful because they make the form very interactive and very interesting to fill for the user. So we will be discussing that in the next lecture. Till then, please keep watching CEC. Thank you.